Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for our Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Bushchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about our guest. The title of the book is On Her Knees Unto the Higher Power. The author, Chijioke. And we are so excited. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I cannot wait to talk to you about your book. Now, as is tradition here on the show, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to the people out there that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. So first question for you is, what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Andrew. My pen name is Chijioke. I was born and raised in Nigeria. I went to grade school through high school in Nigeria and came to the United States for further education, university education. My major was chemical engineering, master's degree in engineering management, and master's degree in business administration.
I love it. So much education. So I know that you will have a wealth of information to share with us today. I cannot wait. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do? Or did you find that life presented the opportunity and you chose to share in that way?
The answer is both. I've wanted to be an author for a very long time, all the way from high school through college, but I did not start writing until after my retirement. So from engineering field, environmental engineering. So I'm very interested in writing, especially things in science, the connection between science and religion. So that's my background, basically. I love writing and I love reading.
I must say that I enjoy a wonderful book. My mother was a nurse, and in her really making sure that she cared about me, one of her greatest gifts that she gave me was the joy of reading. And I love, and it ended up being so funny that towards the end, once she retired from being a nurse, she was a library assistant. So she was able to find, her way back to one of her passions, and that's reading. So you are so right. The joy of reading is so, I think, is an important part of, should be an important part of everyone's life. I agree with you there. Now, the title of your book, On Her Knees Unto the Higher God, that is an interesting title. How did you come about such a title?
Actually, the title is in memory of or dedicated to my mother, who was very passionate and was very dedicated in her beliefs and wanted me to have every opportunity to get education. Even though she could not afford it, she prayed and prayed very hard to her God, as she understood God, and it worked out very well. That I went through grade school, high school, and college, all on academic scholarship. So I believe that her prayers were answered, and so the book is really in her memory for all her prayers that were very well answered.
I tell you, there is nothing like the prayers of a mother. They are so selfless. You know, they are usually for, if not their children, but for loved ones. So you are so right there. I'm so glad that God does listen to our prayers. Now, when you were putting the book together, for so many authors, they have to decide if the book is going to be self-published or if they're going to use a publishing house, be it a small publishing house or a large one. But they still have to make that decision. How did you come to the conclusion as to how you were going to publish your book? Self-published or publishing house?
I would self-publish. I had to hunt to find a publisher or publishing house that would publish the book for me. And I think I did find a good one. And the book was published. I submitted the manuscript and the book was published by the publisher.
And I like asking that question because everyone has a little bit of a different story. Some people do it so that they can have more control over the book. Some people choose the way they choose because they don't want to be really involved. They want to leave it to the professionals. So it's always quite curious whatever the author is going to say there. I love it. I love it. Now, the best way to read your book. For many of my guests, they will say, my book is best read from cover to cover, you know, page after page. Others will say perhaps chapter by chapter. Some will even say it's more like a devotional. Read a few pages, put it down, let that digest, and then go on to the next few pages. What do you think is the best way to utilize or read your book?
I think the best way is to read from cover to cover. That will give a full indication of what the book is all about. So that way one can read few pages or a chapter and then put it down, take a break, coffee break, and go on next time to continue for the whole ability to get the full story about the book. That's where you get the full advantage of reading the book and getting the story behind it. That was my plan.
I can definitely understand that. Now, as far as your writing process was concerned, for so many folks, they need to get away from the hustle and bustle of the day. They need a quiet place, and I think a lot of people are like that. They need a quiet place so that they can write, so that they can hear their thoughts. However, I have talked with some authors and they say, oh, it doesn't matter. You know, the world can be going on around me and I'm still able to get my thoughts down. Did you need a particular environment in order to really write properly?
I think I wrote as the ideas came to mind. I would say it's a collection of my thoughts over the years. So it was not difficult for me at all to sit down and write until I got tired and I was for a short while. Then I'll go back to continue until I finish the whole book. I want to make sure that the book will tell the full story in a continuous combining and not pieces here and there. Just one story complete.
Now, do you think that for someone who is an aspiring author, do you think that one of the hardest things to do is the getting started? Like, you know, actually stepping out there and becoming an author, to just do it? Or do you think it's more so trying to figure out what the storyline is and the personality of the characters and all of that? Do you think there's one part in particular that may be keeping a new author from going on and stepping out there?
For me, it was really relatively easy. I had a story to tell, and I wanted to make sure that I told the story as accurately as possible. So I had a built-up information to share with the world. So I didn't have any problem uh, starting. I knew what I wanted to say. So starting, I only took breaks when I needed, but it was not a very difficult decision to make. So I wrote continuously. If I needed a break, I took the break. But the goal was to start and finish the story.
I love it. I love it. And that is such practical advice. And I like asking those questions to help that new person out there that's really thinking about it, that says, man, I wish someone could just really help me with this little bit. So thank you. Thank you so much for that bit of advice. Now, without, of course, telling the entire story, my longtime listeners will know that when I ask this question, I am asking you to tell us about the storyline. But of course, you can't tell the ending. Why, folks? Because you have to buy the book if you want to know how it ends, right? So with that being said, can you tell us a little bit about your book?
The book started from the point of the fact that my mother wanted me to have education, very good formal education. I had an older sister who passed away at 6 or 7, age 6 or 7, and within a year or less, my dad passed away when I was about 3 years old. So my mother was heartbroken for losing two people she loved within a year, and didn't have the means whatever for me to get the education. Lo and behold, a relative, a half brother, had a child, um, and they didn't have any babysitter. By this time, I was about 8 years old, and the family asked my mother to let me do babysitting at age 8, and that's what my mother cried. Didn't see drop a child so young to be a full-fledged babysitter. But she had no choice. She wanted the education, or I couldn't get it. That was why she prayed, that's the title of the book, she prayed. I did babysit for a full year until the child started walking on promise from the parents. The parents agreed for me to go to school, to pay for my education, because in those days, people paid for their own education, no matter how much it cost. Very small, but relatively expensive. So I had to babysit to earn the opportunity to start school when I was about 8 years old. That worried my mother very, very much. And that was the basis of the title of the book, On Her Knees.
Yeah, oh,
And
I
then
love
from
it.
there,
I love
yeah,
it.
from there,
It is time for us to go to a break. But before we do, can you please remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
the title of the book is On Her Knees, and the publisher is Ex Libris, and the copy can be obtained from Amazon Publishers.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchchester. My guest today is Chijioke, and we are talking about his book, On Her Knees, Unto the Higher God. Now, I am so happy that you are talking about a praying mother, because I know that we have a lot of praying mothers out there, and they appreciate the fact that you definitely are paying homage to your praying mother. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, my next question for you is regarding the power of language. For so many people, they don't really realize how powerful not only the written word, but the spoken word is until something happens, until some type of declaration is made, until there's an event, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I said those words, and now this has happened. With that being said, were you at a particular age when you realized that words had power, not just for authors in particular, but that your words had true power?
Yes, I was brought up in a culture that spoke in proverbs. They're called wise sayings. So I knew from the beginning that words have power, very strong power. Better yet when well laid out, when spoken. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have to agree with you. And I think for so many of the cultures of peoples around the world, um, the spoken word is in fact as powerful, if not more than the written word, because they take the care to remember. It's not just like gossip or just telling away, but we hear great storytellers by the name, of course, each culture calls that person by a particular name. But those great storytellers, they're keeping the history of a people and telling it accurately. It really is amazing, the power of our words. You are so right there. Now, when it comes to advice, I think that everyone can appreciate a good piece of advice. I like to call it a nugget. With that being said, is there any piece of advice that you wish that you would have had before becoming an author that would have made the writing journey easier?
I think I love to read. I really love to read. So with that background and the direction, so I didn't really have any problem whatever in coming up with the idea or how to put it down in words so that I can communicate with other people. But it's a very good idea to develop power of reading, interest in reading.
I love that. I love that. Now, for so many folks, there is an idea of what it means to be successful. I think that when we do a survey of most people and we ask them about being successful, people will say something like, you have a really large home, you have an expensive car, you are able to, wine and dine or travel around the world, and money is no option. That's what most people will say is a version of success. But when it comes to being successful in as an author, it doesn't always look like that, because authors are a different group of folks. It looks the way that they need it to look. As far as being a successful author is concerned, what does that look like to you or for you?
My belief of success in that line is to share my thoughts with the world. As far as the rest of the world people believe in themselves, and I cannot. I share that direction with people in the world. I will consider that a very powerful success.
And I really like asking that question because the answer is diverse as the authors that I interview. There's no right answer there because everyone, I think, has their version of what success looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. I've spoken with people when we talk about those material things that have said, I don't want a big house. I don't want that 6-bedroom house with a 3-car garage with a tennis court or a basketball court in the back. That's just not me. I want a comfy, cozy little 3-bedroom with a 2-car garage. And it's like, yay. So it's really interesting that when we ask that, everyone has their version. And I think that people need to know that it's okay to want whatever it is that you want. And especially when you're an author, what that version of success means. I remember as a little kid, I didn't understand when someone would say, if my book helps one person, then I'm satisfied. It wasn't until I became an author that I understood, yeah, if my book helps one person, then it was definitely worth it. So I agree with you there. My next question for you is that bit of wisdom that you have gained along the way. So, I asked you about being a successful writer and the wisdom that you could share with someone who's thinking about stepping out and becoming an author. But many times I find that authors have also, because they are writers, you've gathered information, you've gathered wisdom along the way, simply living your life. Is there any piece of wisdom or words of encouragement that you could share with our listeners today, just to make sure, we're coming out of COVID and people are trying to get back to normal? Do you have any words of encouragement to help folks find their new normal?
The encouragement is realizing what with digital age in which we live, the world has become a village, and you want to communicate with every member of that village, which is the world. As long as you can give your message to the world and you comment your contribution to the world, that to me is a success. What comes behind it, big homes and cars, travels, that's an additional parameter for the success. But giving your message is primary.
Oh, I like that answer. The world is your village because we are interconnected. Thanks to the internet, we have folks that are listening to this episode, this program right now on their local radio, but they're also listening to it stream. They're also going to listen to this, weeks, years from now from a totally different part of our beautiful earth here. You are so right. We are all interconnected. And I think the sooner we start to behave that way and understand that we all are children of God, that it'll definitely change the way that we interact with each other. I love that answer. Now, when it comes to your future self and the things that you are aspiring to do, many times when I ask the authors, what's in your writing future? I've had folks say, Dr. Angela, listen, I wrote my one book and I'm done. That's all God told me to do. Others have told me, oh my goodness, I've been bitten by the writer's bug and I can't stop writing. Where do you think that you fall? Will you continue to keep writing? Do you have anything in the works right now?
I will continue to write. That is my passion now. And I am completing a manuscript now for my next book, which I plan to finish the manuscript in the next 4 to 5 weeks. That will be my second book. And I love science, religion, spirituality. My books will, will, will be on those subjects. So I am completing another book now in the next 4 or 5 weeks. So I have found my calling in book writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that, and I love that you say that because I think that for so many people, they think that whatever they went to college or university for back when they were perhaps in their 20s or even in their 30s, that has to be their profession forever. But we gain so much knowledge and information along the way. I never thought that I would be doing television as well. I started off as a podcast. I still do that, but I started off with a podcast. Now I'm doing radio, and from radio, I'm doing television as well. Never in a million years did I think that TV was going to come. So you are so right. We should, push ourselves and make sure that we are all that God has called us to be, and not limit ourselves to just that little bit. I tell you, we never know what life has in store for us. So it is a beautiful thing. I love that answer. I love it. Now, when you, and I want to kind of go back just a little bit to when you were still in process of this book, when you held a copy of your finished work in your hands. You have a copy of On Her Knees Unto the Higher God in your hands. How did you feel in that moment? Were you excited?
I was extremely excited knowing that I have paid one very tiny tribute to the woman that made me get education. I was extremely happy for myself and happy on her behalf. Very excited. And that's my
And Chijioke, I don't think that many people realize, like, here in the States we say, education is important. And it is. It is. Don't get me wrong. As a educated woman, I have to agree. But I don't think we understand how difficult it can be for people who don't live in the United States to get that same education. We take for granted being able to simply attend public school because that's just how it is here. But there are so many countries where you have to pay for school every step of the way, and having that education is such a blessing. So I am so glad that your mother had a strong faith in God and that she prayed you through. But just as importantly, I am so glad that not only did you receive that education, not only did you give back to your community, your personal community, but you're now giving back to the global community and you're sharing with your book. Thank you so much for spending time with me here today. Absolutely. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask one last time, if you could please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of the book is On Her Knees Unto the Higher God. The book can be purchased from Amazon and Ex Libris, the publishing company. And I can be contacted by email ogsian@sbcglobal.net or text message 313-610-6186. Those are two means of getting in contact with me at this time.
Absolutely. I love it. Chijioke, thank you so much for spending time with us here.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for spending time with me here as well. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best self. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show? I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about our guest. Her name is Catherine Kennedy, and we're talking about her book, The Light of the World. So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Hello, Angela, Dr. Angela. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot wait to share your book with our audience today. But as is tradition around here, we always start off with a little introduction. We want for everyone to know who you are before we really get into your book. So first question for you, Catherine, is what helps make you who you are today? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, I'm married to my husband, Antonio. I have a daughter, Victoria. A few years ago, I used to run my own fashion shop and then a guest house where I really enjoyed meeting people from all over the world. And I was able to use my gift of healing on all these people who needed help. And lately, well, the last 8 years, I would say, I've become a trance healer where I sit in trance and people are healed by Jesus through me.
I cannot wait to talk to you a little bit more about that and how you address that in your book. Now, speaking of books, you also have author to add to the title of the many hats that you wear. Is being an author something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that this was simply just another way to help explain your gift of healing and share that story with others?
I never ever had any ambition to write a book. And it was actually the spirit world who inspired me and directed me actually to write the book about my experiences. Because so many people, they believe death is the end, and there's so much evidence out there that it's not the end. And as Jesus said, look and you will find. So I looked and I found Jesus.
You are so right. I love that. When we understand, when we have a very personal understanding of what Scripture means, it really and truly does allow for us to be able to spend more time with God and really have that very valued time with God. So you are so right. If you have the eyes, may you see. The ears, may you hear. So I can definitely understand that. Now, the title of your book, The Light of the World. I like the title. Why did you choose those words in that way to entitle your book?
Well, I didn't choose it. Actually, Jesus chose it himself. What I did, I wrote out some titles and asked him which one he liked, and he said he liked The Light of the World. And I said to him that there are already books out there by that title. And he said, but this is the one I like because I am the light of the world.
Oh, I like that. I like that. See, this is why I ask the questions. You never know what the author is going to say, and every now and again you get a really amazing answer. I like that. I like that. Now, when you were in the process of writing the book, I know that for so many people, the decision as to whether or not they're going to self-publish versus using a publishing house Many times you want to leave it to the professionals. You don't have time, you don't have the knowledge base, you just want to make sure that it's done properly, and you just kind of want to write the check to make sure it happens. Others will say, absolutely not. I want to be involved in the entire process. I want to determine every bit and piece that I possibly can, and I believe that I could do this. How did you determine which way to publish for your book? Did you go the self-publishing route? Did you go using a publishing house, be it that it was a small or a large publishing house? Which way did you choose?
Well, I actually received a phone call from Chijioke from the Book Publishing Trail. And at first I said no, because I have received many calls like this from people wanting to publish my book. But to be honest with you, I didn't trust a lot of them, because there was something about Chijioke that I felt she was the right person. Plus the spirit world told me to trust her. And Jesus told me that I could trust her.
Yeah.
To make you understand, when I'm saying that Jesus told me, when people sit with me, Jesus appears over my face. He shines his face on mine, and then he brings through the souls of their loved ones. And this is what the book is all about. It's a series of vignettes of the trances that I had been doing for the last 8 years. And this is why Jesus had said to me, wait and I will direct you to the right people. Mm-hmm. So I waited and waited, and eventually I spoke with Chijioke, and there's something about her I trusted. And afterwards they all agreed that she was the one that I could trust, and she would get my book out there without changing it.
And that is so important. And I'm so glad that you said that. Well, there's a couple of things in there that I'm glad that you mentioned. And one is that we have to trust the people that we're working with. And I think that is so paramount, because this is your work. You have spent your time, your effort. I hate to sound so cliche and say blood, sweat, and tears, but you've given a lot to write this book, and you want to make sure that the person that you are allowing to work with you respects all of that. So that is absolutely true. And that flip side of the coin, when you get that confirmation from God and it is settled in your spirit that this is proper and true, you have to go with that. I have found that so many times people will say, I tried to do this and I kept running into roadblocks. And it's like, maybe that was God's way of trying to tell you to stop, maybe make a left or a right-hand turn, but you weren't supposed to go down that path. But when you get that feeling, and I know exactly what you're talking about, we get those God confirmations, and it really and truly does make all the difference in the world. Now, as far as the proper reader for your book is concerned, for many authors, they choose to write to a particular a reader in mind. Perhaps it's for moms, or it's for someone who's a caregiver. Others will write devotionals and say, I want everyone to be able to enjoy what I have written. When you were putting the book together, did you have a particular reader in mind as far as age group is concerned? Should they be older than high school? Should they be someone who's already very settled in their faith? Is there a particular person, or would you say it's open to all?
Well, I didn't have a particular age group in mind when I wrote it, because I just wrote what happened to me and the friends I sat with over the last 8 years. I wouldn't say it was for a child, but teenagers and older, I think, would enjoy reading. The thing about the book is this: I can provide the evidence. It's not just me saying, "Oh, Jesus speaks to me," but you don't hear him. That's not what happens. When I sit with people in private, Jesus appears over my face and proves that he is Jesus by bringing through the souls of their loved ones. And many people could watch this or read it and think, well, that could be a hologram, it could be trick photography. And God's clever. He already anticipated people feeling that way and saying these things. So there isn't any way that I could sit with you that you would see Jesus' face and then see maybe your deceased family and loved ones appearing over my face and having a one-to-one conversation with you. That can't be faked. And the proof is the people who sit with me see this happen. I don't have to do anything to prove it to anyone. People who sit see for themselves. And this is why the story of what's been happening over the last so many years is absolutely wonderful and fantastic. And I can do it online. And Jesus had said to me he would catapult me out into the world. He said that I would bring many souls to him. And I, for all these years, couldn't understand how this was going to take place. And then I did an experiment one day with Katayela, and we did the trance online. I am here in Scotland, and she's in America. And Jesus came through online on our computers, on Zoom, I think we did it. And she saw Jesus. Then she saw her grandfather. She saw other relatives and spoke to her in a way that it's my voice, but sometimes the accent or the way, the intonation in my voice is the person who has, gone on. They're not dead. They're alive, more alive than they've ever been. And they're desperate to tell us that there's no death. They're desperate to tell us that heaven is and that Jesus is. And this is just another way that God is using the technology to get through to people in the world. He did say that the gospel has to be reached to the four corners of the world, and we all wondered, well, how could that possibly happen? It's only in the last few weeks that the penny has dropped for me, myself, and I realize how I'm being used. And it's wonderful. I'm still in awe of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I had this gift. But in the last 10 years, sitting in trance, we and myself and a few friends decided that we would like to experiment. And because I had this gift, we sat in a group. And at first, I just spoke. And when I came home in the evening, I remember thinking, how did that happen? How did these people come through me and speak? And they predicted that I would work with the highest of the high. And even then, I still couldn't believe it. And then an angel appeared to the group and said that I'd be working with the highest of the high. And eventually, Jesus came through and he made me sort of live his passion. And to explain that will take more than 2 minutes, but it's all explained in the book, how he did it and what happened. And after it was finished, we were just speechless. We said, was that really who we think it was? And of course it was.
Well, Catherine, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes, the book is for sale on Amazon. It's called The Light of the World. And you can also go into my website, which is catherine-kennedy.com.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. My guest today is Catherine Kennedy, and we're talking about her book, The Light of the World. Now, I want to ask you this question, and hopefully not offending in any way, but just getting some clarification. Because I know that there's going to be that person out there that says, oh my goodness, it sounds like what they're doing, what she's talking about is kind of like a Ouija board, or it's something that's New Age, or it's something scary. I don't think we're supposed to be dealing with that. How does she know that it's God talking to her. So could you address, I'm sure people have asked you those types of questions. Can you address that person that may be coming from that particular point of view?
Oh yes, I've heard it all before, and so has Jesus, because remember when Jesus walked and healed in his land, the priests there accused him of being in league with the devil, or being the devil himself. And it actually gets a bit tiresome, because if you sit with me and Jesus comes through, it's not just Jesus who comes through. Mary has come through, and then they bring through the souls of your deceased loved ones. When I first sat with the group, the main person who was in my group at that time was the Reverend William Neal, and he was a Church of Scotland minister, and he sat with me, and he was the one actually, to begin with, he and my other friend Jackie saw Jesus' face. Now, before we started any of this, we say our prayers, we have holy water, we have crosses, you name it. We take all the precautions that we do not have anything bad into the house or into our group when we're sitting. So the proof of the pudding is there. If it was anything to do with the devil or anything bad, why would they be healed? Why, when they sit, they feel a lovely, warm feeling? There's no... The only way that people will really understand it would be if they sit themselves and experience it, or read the book. That's all I can say to that. There are always going to be people who say things like that, and all I can say is if it's the devil, then he's doing a good job for Jesus, because many people are converting to Christianity after they see Jesus. They're not going with the devil. So, and I, for one, wouldn't want anything to do with the devil. And I'm not in the least bit frightened of them, because I know that I have the power of Jesus with me. So I don't fear anything demonic or anything bad happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember talking to one lady, and this was in a personal space, long ago, when we were able to, interact with people prior to COVID. And she was talking, and she says, I have an ability to kind of just know when I need to kind of take someone to the side and just kind of pray for them, this intuition, this knowing. And she says, I'm not a psychic or anything like that, but I just kind of can feel. I have an extra sense of people's worry and concern. And she said the same thing. Someone asked, it's like, how do you know that, that's a gift? You guys say it's a gift. And she's like, I don't want anything to do with the devil. She said the same thing. She was like, absolutely not. God allows me to do this because I bring God into this. I pray to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I know that He has given me this ability to just care and to have more love and compassion for His children, my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I was like, I totally understand what you're saying. And I think people can tell the difference. Those that are for God are for God, and those who are not definitely are not. So I can understand what you're saying there. Now, for someone who has been able to not only bring others to Christ through what you are doing, but you have a way of inspiring people because they needed to have that confirmation. Like, okay, God, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to send me a sign, or, I need you to tell me this particular thing. And that thing has happened for them. Can you give us an example of a significant event that perhaps has happened for you that is confirmation that you are doing exactly what God has purposed you to do, that God has called you to do this thing in this time of now?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, but the main thing that happened would be when Jesus first came through, And I was sitting in a recliner, lying back in a recliner chair. And Jesus, and he does it to this day, he holds my arms up and puts my legs straight out in front, and then he crosses one foot over another. And we came to call that the crucifixion mode. So, first of all, this would happen, and then Jesus' face would appear over mine. And the face that appeared over mine was the crucified face. The people who see him see a face filled with anguish. His beard is sparse because they pulled bits of his beard out. And he looks haggard because he's hanging on the cross being crucified. And he put me through this. And then afterwards he made me enact kneeling in Gethsemane, and he was praying because he knew that the Roman soldiers were coming. I didn't feel the pain, obviously, that of Jesus felt when he was being crucified, but he put me through his anguish. I felt the fear, and each step going through this process until the end when Jesus gave up his spirit, he let out one tremendous yell. I didn't think that a yell like that could come out of my body. And although I'd read the Bible and been taught the Bible, there were lots of bits of the Bible I didn't remember or hadn't read. But William, being a minister, knew every detail of the Bible, and he knew every detail of the crucifixion. And he said to me, that's when, before Jesus gave up his spirit, that's what he did. Because there were things that I enacted that I didn't know. And, that confirmed it for us. That was good enough for, and people being healed. Well, that's the main thing. People are healed. And now the fact that, I can do this online, and anyone in doubt just has to come online, make an appointment, and see for themselves. Seeing is believing. And, that's all I can say. It was such a dramatic experience. That, I mean, if that were the devil, what was the point? It brought us closer to Christ. Mm-hmm. And for a long, long time when I was younger, I wasn't sure about Jesus. I used to, I believed in Jesus, but I wasn't sure if he was the Son of God, because when you get older, you start to doubt and question all the things you've been taught when you were young. So I looked for Jesus. I searched for him for many years, asking him to give me proof of his existence, to tell me who he is. And all these years later, he answered me. And I know it's Jesus.
You know, I think about all of the beautiful ways that God comes to us in our personal time, in our private time, but also the way that he comes to the world. And, you know, people have had a hard time the world over, believing those things that we as human beings don't fit nicely in the box, right? How we're always saying about we need to think outside of the box. And we say that because for so many people, they stay stuck in the box their entire lives. And to be able to use you as the vessel, to be able in this particular way, there's someone who is perhaps not going to believe until they have an experience with you, or they need that confirmation, like I said before. And once they have that time with you, it is a sealed deal for them, and they understand there's no way she was faking that. This is 100% real. And then they too are able to give the glory to God for having had that experience. I love it. I love it. Now, I know that for so many folks, having personal time with God is something that is so difficult. You know, our worlds are getting hectic, especially as we start to roll back into a sense of normalcy with people going to work every day and things opening up. What do you think is one of the things that people need to do to make sure that they have that private time or that alone time with God before we get back to the rat race called life? How can people incorporate more time with God? Just in your opinion.
Well, to me, it's a prayer, talking to God, and I don't mean that you have to go down on your knees and say set prayers. You just talk, have a conversation with Him. And in my experience, I mean, years ago, people used to say to me, oh, I have a personal relationship with God. And I used to think, how do they do that? How do they get it? How can I do this? And I persevered, and I didn't always, as I said, go down on my knees to pray. I just talked to God. I have a picture of Jesus in my bedroom, which is taken from the Turin Shroud. And I always feel that's the nearest to what he looks like. And every day I talked and I asked him to answer me. I wanted to know if he was real. And because I pursued him, he answered me. That's what I believe will happen with everyone. And a lot of the time when I'm giving people healing, it's Jesus who's doing the healing, and we all acknowledge that. But what happens, they tell me about their own experiences that they haven't told anyone else, simply because I think people will laugh at them or say it's demonic. And one particular one was a retired businessman who was a member of our church. And my minister at that time was William, and he sent this gentleman to receive healing. And once I was giving him healing, we sat chatting, and he said, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. He said, my wife passed over so many years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, I was so down without her, I just didn't know if I could carry on. So one day he went for a walk in the woods. And he said, I was just walking along with my head down, thinking about my wife. And he said, before my wife passed over, she had lost the use of her legs. And I can't remember if they were amputated or if she just couldn't use her legs. And he said something made him look up, and he looked up, and there was his wife doing a pirouette like a ballet dancer. And she was showing him that she was whole. Now, this was the type of man. I said to him, did you tell Mr. Neil that's the minute? And he said, no, I haven't told anybody. How could I tell them? They'll laugh at me. And this is the problem that we have in the world today, because people have these experiences all the time, lots of them, but they don't tell anyone because they're embarrassed. And I understand that, because I at first didn't know if I could do this, but because Jesus asked me to, then no contest, I'm doing it. And people can laugh or they can say what they like. I know that I'm doing this for Jesus. It's nothing to do with me and what I want. It's what he wants. And that's why I'm doing it, because I'm a very, very private person. I prefer to live a life in obscurity. But I realize that's not going to happen. And the one thing I've learned is Jesus takes you out of your comfort zone, because he certainly has taken me out of mine.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your God-given gift to my listeners today. I really appreciate your being on. But before I let you go, could you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes, the book is called The Light of the World, and it's for sale on Amazon. And on my web there, it's Catherine-Kennedy.com. And can I just say, Dr. Angela, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak about Jesus.
Absolutely. And thank you, Catherine, for sharing your gift with the rest of us as well. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it here with us, and I appreciate that. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.